All right, is my screen visible?
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
All right, wonderful. All right, well, very excited to get started. So hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing us an opportunity to join you today. My name, as Anton already said, is Christopher Valenciano. I am joined by my colleague, Delvis Echeverria. We are very pleased to be here today. I would like to just start off with a little background on us before we go ahead and jump into the hands-on session. Delvis and I are both performance test engineers, and we form part of the team for SQA advisory. So just a few of the collaborations that we have worked with, just so that you have some idea. These are many of the groups that we have worked with in the past and continue to work with today. Right here, we have many different forums and that we have collaborated with. Many of these are either presentations or webinars. Some of these are actual courses that we work with, a few Facebook groups as well, and many companies that we have performed consulting and training for also. So if you're ever interested in learning some more, you can definitely reach out. Now, as I mentioned, certifications, we are currently master trainers and co-authors of the performance tester with JMeter, part of the Performance Testing United umbrella of certifications that they offer. So if at any point anyone is interested, you can definitely reach out for more information. And as I mentioned, not only do we offer training in performance testing, but we also offer training and consulting in performance automation usability testing, as well as script creation and consulting as part of what we do. So that was just a little brief background on the two of us and our team. And now that the introductions are complete, we can move on to what everybody is here for, and that's JMeter itself. So let me get out of here and open up my JMeter session. All right. And today what we're going to be doing and working with mostly is just a little brief explanation on how to create a script in JMeter itself. And we're going to work on a few different elements of what JMeter does offer. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump in. The section we're going to try today, and this is a very nice little web application that is very simple for testing and automation practice, as well as performance testing. That way you can learn how to write your scripts through this website. So the website that we will be using is called blazedemo.com. This is a nice little simple web application that we can use. So when we are talking about JMeter, and this is JMeter itself, as you can see here, I am running version 5.2.1. There are newer versions out there. This just happens to be the iteration that I started today. So as you can see, it's a very simple application. It's very straightforward. So very clean, as you can see. What we want to work on is developing our test plan. So as we move from here, we want to start here, and we can right click. We select our test plan and we can right click. And the very first thing that we want to add is our thread group. Our thread group is where we are going to be storing all of our recordings, all of the applications and the petitions that we make to the server. Everything is going to be stored right here in the thread group. All right. This is going to be kind of our main umbrella or our folder that's going to keep all of our steps. Now, how do we record it? We do need to include what's called a non-test element, and this is our test script recorder. So this is what allows us to actually communicate with the server, and JMeter functions sort of as an intercept between the web browser and the server itself. So basically what we're going to use JMeter as is to interject in between the user and the navigation on the web browser and the servers, that we can intercept all that communication, all the transmissions that are coming through. For that, it is very important that we need to set up the proxy in our web browser. Now, for this particular case, I am using Firefox. It is a very simple setup to set your proxy correctly. We need to set our port correctly as well, because if not, it won't communicate. There will be a miscommunication. So in Firefox, we can always go in and find our proxy settings. and we just need to make sure that it is a manual proxy and for port 8888, which is what we're using at this time. So that being said and done, we are already set up here. So in order to continue that recording, we would need to add the target controller, meaning where we're going to store that information. We select our thread group, which we had already established. And all we have to do is click on the start button. Now, before I do that, just as a common practice and through experience, if we go to request filtering, what we want to do is to keep a very nice and neat recording so that it doesn't include all of our embedded resources, a lot of our CSS calls and redirects and information that a website usually includes. We can just add our suggested excludes. And this is just going to load a regular expression that's going to exclude a lot of those information so that we are not viewing that in our recording. So this is a very simple site, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, as I click start, I'm going to get a root certificate message. All we have to do is click on OK if we've already installed the certificate. And now we can go through our steps. So if we go to Blaze demo itself, and if you noticed, and if you're paying close attention, right here, my thread group now has a petition. It means that it already went through. So that information is capturing, it is coming through. So this is a very simple web application. As I said, it's just a simulation of a travel agency. So we can select the 2 destinations that we want to go to. And we can select find our flights. And from here, as you see, we added the reserve. Now, if I click, for example, on choosing a flight, now our purchase went through. And we can fill in our regular information. And this is just for example purposes. If I could spell. 5. And now I have to make sure that I'm paying for it. So put in my credit card information. Don't worry, this is not a real credit card. So no need to worry about putting information in there.
Don't be in a hurry.
Right? Nobody will be able to get anything for Cyber Week this week with that credit card. All right, then we go ahead and purchase the flight. And as we can see, we have the confirmation. This is the web application itself. So now we can come back here. We go to our script recorder and we can just stop the recording. All right, now we can see that it did load a little bit of kind of fluff information here. That's just some of the interaction between my specific settings in Firefox. So these are usually ones that we can ignore. Again, I know that through the experience that we have that these can be ignored. The main ones are, of course, our home page, our reserve section. As we can see, we have our values that we entered. We entered Boston and Berlin as the from port and to port. Then we can see our purchase. This is the flight number, the price of the flight, which airline we selected, and what our, again, destinations are. All right, and then once more, the confirmation, the information that we entered there is all captured here in JMeter. So JMeter went through and captured all that information. It pretty much intercepted the information that I was sending between the web browser and the server itself. So we captured that information, and now based on this, we can go ahead and reuse this whole script that we recorded to create load on a test on a web service or a website. We can stress it out to see if it uses a lot of additional users, if it'll handle that. And to do that, we would go here back to my thread group, and I can increment my number of users, my ramp up period, meaning how many seconds I want all of my users. If I were to have 100 users and I wanted them to take 30 seconds for all of them to be active on the system, then it would take 30 seconds to slowly climb all of those 100 users before they were actually active on the system. So this right here is what is going to allow us to be able to actually perform load or stress test on a system to be able to test their performance. All right, we can indicate how many times we want it to happen, if we wanted to just loop once or multiple times. Now, this is just the simple method of actually recording a script in JMeter. As you can see, it's just the petitions itself. And this was a very simple web application. Now, there are other websites and web applications that are good for this. And to show a little bit more in-depth details, I'm not going to go through and actually run the recording myself today live, but I have pre-built this already in, so I can show you a lot more of the elements of what JMeter is capable of doing. So if you'll allow me a moment, I will pull this one over here instead. We're not going to save that one right now. So this is a more complete script that we have already pre-recorded for these purposes. As you can see, there are a lot more petitions. There's 2 different thread groups that I have. I have group A and group B. There's a lot more information that you can see here. As you can see, here's my test script recorder that I would utilize to actually record that script itself. Now, why do I bring this up and why do I want to use a different recording for this? So that I can show you a few different examples. Now, this recorder is for a website called automationpractice.com. This is a sample or a test e-commerce site that you can utilize to kind of put load on and try to test your automation and your script recording skills. It will not take a lot of load. I will be honest. We have tried it before. It does kind of die out after you include and inject about 10 users. It will usually slow down and kind of stall out. But the reason I wanted to show you this is because if in my previous example, I were to just run that script and actually perform it to see if it gives me information, the problem is every time I'm cycling that, if I were to loop it over or add multiple users, then it's always going to throw the same information. It would give me the same destinations. It would give me the same airline. There's no way that I can actually create variables in there if I leave it static as the way I pulled it. So one of the ways that we can do that is through the parameterization. So a tough word to say regardless in any language. So parameterization is what we use to actually add in variables into our system. So for example, right here in this petition itself, as you can see, I put in an email, I put in a password. That was the authentication that we were using for this website itself. If I were to run this script, I would only be using this information. Every time I tried, no matter how many users I created, it would always use this email and this password. So there's no way for me to actually add multiple users, even though I'm using the same one and I try to inject 10, 15, 100 users. Even if I do that, it's always going to be essentially the same user. So this is where parameterization comes in. So for that, let me show you here. For that, we can start and create parameters or variables. As you can see, this is the variable scheme and layout for a JMeter. And the way we do this is we create a CSV file. In this case, this CSV file is just a list. It's comma separated, and by each line, it'll be a user and a password. User, comma, password. User, comma, password. And that's the format of our CSV file. That in itself is going to allow us to create parameters and be able to use multiple users. Now, I'll show you what this looks like by actually running this script momentarily. And of course, today it does not want to cooperate with me, but just
too many testers.
right? No, but I know exactly what the problem is here. It is, I have this in a different location.
By the way, will you share this project somewhere on GitHub for our users to check it out?
Certainly, we will be sharing the script itself at the end, just so that everybody has it. That way everybody can go ahead and run this same script. We'll make sure that we add this specifically so that everybody can play around with it. So the reason this was not working is because I did temporarily change my file location. So it was not actually pulling my CSV file. So it is very important that you have the path in the correct location, because if not, it, as you see, we'll get an error and won't actually run any information. So if we try this once more, now as we can see, it's actually progressing. We have just 2 users. It's running the script, and we can see how this processes. Now with my 2 users, if I see my information, I can go through, I can see all of my data here. I can see that this is using that one user, JMeter1 at jmeter1.com, and the password. If I go to my second user, I can see that now it pulled JMeter2. This is where the reason it's now pulling my 2 users is because I created that file that will allow it to pull different users. And this is how you create parameters or variables in JMeter. So it's a very powerful tool if you want to test different processes or create multiple users, or if you have multiple selections, like in our travel agency, there were different destinations that we could select. Then you can create that a parameter file, and it will pull that information for each iteration that you want to implement, right? And that is the main basis of parameterization in JMeter. Now, that leads me to the next part. Now, parameterization is actually very simple because you're essentially just including variables. Now, the next part, which is correlation, is a little bit different. Correlation is what we do when we take a dynamic variable or a dynamic value that the server sends back in different petitions to JMeter. So if we were to use that as a static value, and the server, when it sends that information, it updates every time. And if we use that static value, the next time we try to run the script, it's actually going to stall on us and it'll give us an error because we're not actually using the value that the server provided us each time. So it is very important that to do that, we are able to extract that dynamic value in a way that makes sense. Now, again, through experience, we know that there are certain dynamic values that we use. For example, one of the most common ones is a token. As you can see, this is a very large number that we did not enter at any point. It is not a username. It is not a password. In the case of this website, which is an e-commerce, it's not a product that we selected at any point. This is a value that is sent by the server itself in a petition previously. So this is what we are sending back to the server in this precise petition itself, or in this line. So in order to be able to use this logically, we need to correlate this information. We need to go through every single petition that we have and start looking for those dynamic values. For example, this is manually entered. We know that. And we need to find those dynamic values that we didn't use. This token is the exact is a very good example of that. If we continue, we have to go step by step. Now, in order to be able to correlate, you need to run, and the reason I have 2 thread groups is because I made this script, or I ran this process twice. I made the recording 2 times. Now, the reason for that is once I see that I have a token, I need to go back to my second script and compare it and make sure, oh, that is indeed a separate value. It is very different. So from there, now I need to go in, find where that the server sent me that petition. I need to go through, open up all of my information. It is a very precise method to be able to do that. I need to open up all of my petitions and find where that information was sent by the server. In this particular case, it was sent in this petition previously. I use it down here, but it was sent up here. So the way to extract that, I need to use regular expressions and a regular expression extractor. And this is just one of our most common regular expressions in JMeter that we utilize. I create a new variable at this point that is going to allow me to extract that information here where the server sends it, and then utilize it down here. Now, this is a very manual process, and it can be very time consuming, and it's one of the most important steps in performance testing, because in order that you can use those scripts over and over again. Because if you only record it once and you don't use parameters and you don't correlate, then that script, the next time you're going to run it after you recorded it, it'll probably give you an error because it's not creating those dynamic values. Now, this is a very tedious process. It can be very time consuming. Now, ourselves here in SQL Advisory, we have gone through and created actually an application that we currently have in beta testing internally for ourselves. And it's actually called ScriptMeter. This, what it does is it creates a very fast and easy way of comparing the two different scripts that I ran to be able to give you all those correlated values. So for example, if I had my two scripts that I recorded in JMeter, I can upload those scripts. I can save them and upload them individually. I can go to my compare, which is what I was doing here when I went, this is petition 1 to petition 1 down here, petition 2 to petition 2. I have to still go through and find all of my values until I find the token or any other values that are dynamic. Now, as you can see, this one automatically does it for me without me having to go one by one by one. All right. So this automatically gives me all of my values, all of them. I can select, I can deselect whichever value I want to use. For example, here's my token. If I wanted to just use that token, as I explained, then I deselect everything and I use just my token. Now, as you can see in the first recording, this is the value we had. In the second recording, this is the value we had. So if I go in and I upload the sources that I had, and this is the results that I got from my second script. Now I can go back here, and this gives me my actual regular expression. It gives me the information that I have. So as you saw here, as I showed you, sorry, my regular expression, I had to do this manually. I had to go through, I had to find this, I had to look for it in my petitions. I had to run the script multiple times to be able to get that value, right? But here, all I did was click through, I loaded my two scripts, I didn't have to search for anything, and it gives you my regular expression. You can see that this regular expression is a little bit different. I can go in and substitute that for my regular expression that I prefer, if I would like to use that one instead. Or I can even extend this if I need to. I need to be more specific with the variable that I'm using. I can do that here. I can confirm it. Now, automatically, I correlate, and it gives me my new script that I will now, at that point, implement into JMeter. And from there, I can do all this process. I did it in about 60% of the time, or sorry, I saved about 60% of the time that I would have needed to correlate all of this by using that. Now that gave me my regular expression. I pull in that script that the application that we've created. I put that straight into JMeter, and from there, it's ready. All I have to do is keep running. I can include my different number of users. I can add my ramp up period time. And from there, I have automatically run the script. Now, that being said, what is the purpose of actually doing all of this? And why am I going through all the problems and all the effort of creating a script, creating parameters, correlating, and doing all of that if I'm not getting anything out of it? Well, what we are getting out of it right here, as we can see, these were the results that I was looking at. This result tree, these are called listeners. This allows me to see if any of my petitions is giving me an error. I can see if the website is wrong. I can see if it's giving me a response data. I can see my response code. It can tell me if there's an error at any point in running this process. Now, outside of that, which is very simple and very visual, for example, and I'll show you manually how I can perhaps change that. If I were to go and do index.php1, let's say I change the path of the website itself, and I'm just doing this as an example. I go and run my script. See, automatically it is giving me an error, and it's not going to give me correct information because that website that I was looking for, that I interjected right there in the process, visually, I can see right there that I have an error with my script. All right. It won't necessarily tell me the exact error, but I have a response code here. And now I know that in this petition itself, which is this one called index.php number 28, I can go in and I can visually check to see what happened. Now, that was just an example so that you can see what the results tree options are and what it can give you and how it gives you that information. Now, if I clear that once more and I run it again now correct, because I have corrected that error, I want to show you another one of our listeners that which are very good. So if I go into this one, and it has not finished, my script is still running, as you can see. Right? I go into my aggregate report. This gives me each petition that I have created, all of the petitions here, and it gives me a lot of very valuable information. It tells me how many samples have been sent, what the average duration, these are all times, what the average duration is for that sample. It gives me what the median time was. It gives me my percentiles as well, 90 percentile, 95 percentile, and 99 percentile. It'll give me those lines. It'll tell me how well my application is performance and what my times are. It'll give me the minimum duration and the maximum duration. If there are any errors, what my margin of error was. And we can open this up. It'll tell me how much information was received or sent in kilobytes. So very good information that you can get just from a simple listener that we have added to my script. All right. That shows me all the information here. We can see that in a table as well. Each individual petition itself, what the start time was. It goes in chronological order. What the label of the petition was, which is the name here. And how long it took, what the status was. This status is the same as if we have here. And you can see the little green check mark. And our response code is 200. And our response message is okay. Right? And it gives us some of the same information. It gives us how many bytes was sent, received, sent, latency, and just very good information that you can use. Once you test and run your script, it'll tell you what the information is and what kind of data you are getting from that script itself. Now, some of the other ones that we like to use are active threads over time. This is a good one to see if you to tell if any of your users or threads have fallen. This tells me that I loaded my users. We have number of users here or active threads and how much time it's taking for the whole process. So this is over time. And then a very nifty one that we have, this is the response times over time. So this tells us, and it's a very visual, I mean, if you don't know what you're looking at, it is very much gobbledygook, right? But if you look at it, what it's telling us is how long or what the response time for each petition is over time. So this is how long it took for that process to run, and this is the duration of the test itself that we were using, right? So these are just a few of the listeners that we have. JMeter is incredibly versatile, and there are many other listeners that you can implement, that you can use. For example, this one that I have disabled right here will allow you to store all of these results to a file, so that then you can pull it up in a different an APM, a different APM if you want. It'll give you a lot of different information. So again, it is very versatile, and for the sake of time, I can't go into a whole lot of detail because, as I said, there's a lot of different certifications in JMeter that will allow you and go into a lot of very good information, and there's not a whole lot that we can cover in a very brief period of time. So with that being said, I do want to allow my colleague some time to present the information that he has, but I will be happy to take any questions as time permits. But I will allow my colleague Delvis to go ahead and continue with his part of the presentation.
Sure. Can I ask just one question that comes up from the chat? Virus is asking, is it the best practice to use a request name as it generated by JMeter, because you have all this bunch of index PHP with numbers and it's not like easy to understand?
Of course, and that is a very good question. JMeter, and it's not one step that I took, but when you create your script recorder, you can create prefixes right here, And as you click through each process, every click or every web redirect, you can give it a prefix. So that prefix will actually come back here, and essentially what it's going to do is going to name each petition itself. That way you know exactly what it is. There are other control groups that you can implement. For example, there's a lot of additional information that you can do. There are logic controllers and that you can create and just put in like a name, and you can group your petitions. You can say all of these different petitions, for example. Let's just click a few at random. For example, these to here, I can group these and say, this is the actual purchase process. I can bunch these together and say, this is the sign-in process. I can actually filter those in to a different parent by using different controllers through my thread group that will allow me to actually create that logic so that it is more appealing to the eye and more easy to understand. Now, the reason I didn't do that, again, this is just, for example, a simple controller. I can put this up at the top here, and I can add, for example, just if I wanted to have all my purchase information, I can add that to my simple controller, and I can name this purchase process. And now I know that all of those petitions that I just took out of there are part of the purchase process. So there is a lot of logic that you can add to JMeter by renaming your petitions themselves or grouping them into different parent umbrellas to actually apply different processes to each one.
Yeah, even in addition, when you try to record in the script in JMeter, you can, when you click on the start proxy, you can see the pop-up. So in that pop-up, you can type the name of the request. So it's so important, keep in mind that question, because it's so important, you know, create the name of the request associated with the user action. So it's more easy to understand our script, because if you can see, it's only index, 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 index. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of difficult for us to understand what happened in our script. So when you try to click on your start proxy, so you can show Christopher. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to create just a new
because
one. Sorry.
it's the best way to create the name of the request, because you are doing, you know, the name of request and the user action.
So if I click on start here, once I click OK, and this shows up on my other screen, but
exactly.
we get
that one.
This this is the transaction control right here. Is that same prefix that I showed you right here? See? So if I name this as home page,
exactly.
When I go back to my website and I click on the home page, now as I am processing this, see, it automatically names it as I click on it. So if I wanted the destinations, for example, I go here, and now I just click, let's say those that are there, find flight. Now my destinations were loaded. Now if I want to select the flight, I can select the flight. And then if I do purchase or credentials, if I just use whatever static there and I purchase the flight, and now my credentials.
Great. I think that's the great way to organize all these requests.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yep. Perfect.
All right.
Okay. If you want, I can start with my presentation. I don't know if there is another question.
Sure. I just want to remind all that we have chat here on Zoom. You can write some questions, and guys will take a look.
Certainly.
Thank you, Christopher.
All right. Let me go ahead and stop my share. And thank you very much. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Delvis.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much for joining us. Morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are located. You know, we are here in Florida. I know you are in Abu Dhabi. So I don't know if anyone is from other country. So thank you so much for joining us. So, you know, for today, I want to talk about how you can create test plan in JMeter for web service and database. So it's quite different because you can do the recording, and Christopher explained before, using browser, proxy recorder, and port. But JMeter is pretty easy to use. So for test plan creation, for web service and database, it's simple. So no worries, okay? So let's start with web service. So we have two web service demo for this presentation. These web services are focused on the calculator. So you can add and multiply two integer numbers. So this is the first one. This is the second one. So if you click here, you can see that web service. Even here, you can using that web service to learn, to practice the automation web service. Even you have for addition, divide, multiply. So for today, we are doing addition and multiply. So it's so important, keep in mind that when you are trying to automate web survey, you have to see the content of your web survey. So, sometimes when we are working on the project, so many people say, hey, Delvis, I need that you automate that web survey. So I tell, hey, what is that web service? I need the information about that web survey. Even for the API, it's very similar. So for today, we're doing web survey. So we need that information. We need that content on the web survey because we need, create the script manually. It's completely different that Christopher explained before because, Christopher explained using the UI, the interface. So for us, as here on web survey, we need to do the script manually. So it's so easy. For example, because the web service includes all the information to putting on the JMeter. So the first step into the JMeter, let me show you. I have prepared here our web service. So the first step in JMeter is go to the test plan and then right click and create the thread group like Christopher explained before. Thread group here. So after that, I need to create the HTTP request. So why? Because web service and API are focused on the HTTP protocol. So we need to use the HTTP request. So in this case, I have to create, right click again, go to the sample. And here I'm going to select HTTP request. So if you see the recording before and Christopher, you can see the same HTTP request, but that HTTP request was recording. So here in web server, you have to do manually. Okay, so it's so easy. Look at this. The first step is go to here to the web service and see what is the verb. In that case, it's a post. Here we need to select the method or the verb post. And then we need the path. If you are going to here, you can see the path here. You have to copy this one and put in here. Next is the host. If you see in the JMeter, the host is equal to the server name. So you have to copy the host, Control C, and put it here in the JMeter. Okay, so the next value, it's headers. So you have to create into the HTTP request, the header managers. You have to right click and then go to the configuration element and select the header managers. So here you copy this one here. Keep in mind, you have here the sub option. It's specifying, that is the multiply. Okay, so let me copy here, this one, Control C, and using add for clipboard, and you can see all the headers. Content type, content left, and sub option, it's equal here. So the next one is the body of your web service. So here in the JMeter, you have to go to the tab body data, and then you have to copy this one. So in this case, you can see here the integer. So that means the number that you have to multiply. In that case, we need to replace that one integer and specify like 5 and 5. Okay, so next step on the JMeter is create listener to see what happened with your execution. For example, at the view result tree, here you can see what happened with your request and you respond from the server. So now, for example, we are executing just for one user and let me see what happened. Of course, let me save my test plan for the web service. Let me put in here web service one. Let me save. Okay. Let me see on the view result tree. If you go into the view result tree, you can see in color green. That means it's correctly the execution. So if you click here, you can see your request is all the web service with your value 5 and 5. And if you click here, you can see the response. So that response is the same one in my documentation. If you can see, this is the response from my web service. Okay, so if you looking here, you can see, for example, multiply result. That is the integer. That is the result of my web service. So here you can see. Let me put in here more. You can see multiply result 25 because I'm putting 5 and 5. So the result is 25. Even this one, you can change the format. For example, I can see like, for example, XML. So you can see the result more clarified. You see here, the body, the response, and you can see the value here. So that is the way that you can automate, the web service on the JMeter. If you see, it's very easy. If even you can use the template on the JMeter for, more quickly. For example, the template is located here. This icon, you can click here and you can select your template. For example, I'm doing building the software service test plan. I can click here, can create here. So automatically JMeter create the template for my web service. Okay, it's the same one, but it's like a more organized. They use the user-defined variables, HTTP request default, but it's the same one. Even JMeter includes the real web service, but that template, it doesn't work right now because that web service is not available right now. So for practice, the web service you can do, for example, this one, addition, multiply, and even another one like a subtract and divide. So let me show you another thing in the web service. Sometime in our project, we have testing, API web service with dependency. So if you see that web service, it's independently, it's unique. It's just for this one. So sometimes the API and web service includes dependency. So we can simulate the same dependency of my web service and API on the JMeter. So for example, this is the same one. This is the web service for add two integer number. I put in here 20 and 30. Here is the multiply two integer number. But what happened? This one includes the dependency with the first one. What does it mean? This value, the second integer on the multiply, it's the result of the first web service. So I need to run, first of all, my first web service up to integer number, and then I need to extract, like Christopher explained before with the regular operation, I need to extract the result of my first web service because that value on the result, it's my second number of my web service for multiply. Okay, so it's very easy. You have to put in here the regular operation and then specify, your regular operation and assign the result. And then that variable you have to put in your web service, like in the format for the JMeter. So if we execute this one, look at this. We are addition 30, 20 and 30, E50. So if I execute those web service, the first one, it's, sorry, the first one is 50. So that result is the second number on my web server for multiply. Look at this. In multiply, I'm going to request. So this is the result of my first web service. So it's, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to create web service. The problem here is when you have a lot of web service. It's just 2 web service, but I know on our projects, maybe we have more than 50 or I don't know, 100 API. So the dependency, it's very important to keep in mind in our web service doing on JMeter. So this is all for web survey. If you have any questions right now. Okay.
Yes, we have now from Alexander.
Yeah.
Uh, How
Yeah.
supportable are API scripts created using Geometer? What if we need to check some value through whole project? For example, same host, some user ID. Do we need to go and change each HTTP request to modify it?
Yeah. For example, so many people ask everyone, hey, I need to automate the API, but I need, for example, the Postman of SOAP UI. So I think that the JMeter is the good solution when you try to execute not only functional testing. If you are thinking execute performance testing on your API, JMeter is a good solution because they need to do the thing with the API. So for example, for that question, you can create here. Let me show you the another one.
Sorry, as far as I understood, for example, you used Geometer to record some session, and then you want to modify it to use some variables. Do you need to modify each request, or there is some like a better way to just like to say, Geometer, I want to replace all tokens to this variable, or something like that?
So the way I understand it, and yes, there is a way. There is, as you can see right there on Delvis's second screen that he just pulled in, there's a section called user-defined variables.
This one here.
Yes. So
Yeah.
those user-defined variables are the ones that that Alexander is asking about. You can create those variables. So, for example, if you need to change the website, or you have a different user, you can create that variable here, and then all you would have to do is just change that value once.
Exactly. But even you can get all the token for the API. You can get first of all the token and then pass the token with the rest of the request. Even the response assertion. Yeah, exactly. You can do that with the response assertion. Yeah. User defined values. Yep. Because you can here change the host name, the variables. I know host name, the paths, even another port here.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Yep.
Yeah, team, just I would like to share the things. So if you want to have the same host, I'm say if you want to parameterize or use in the same request, you can use the user-defined variables. But however, if you want to validate whether the response is containing this, then you need to definitely use response assertions, like whether the response assertions containing the header or the response contains in the body and all. So any validations goes to assertions, and any kind of requests, if you want to make into a variable and use it into every request, you can use user-defined variables, or else you can use a CSV file and you can use CSV dataset config and send all the variables in that and with multiple values. That creates data parameterization. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes. And just to interject, I'm sorry, but some of the sample scripts that we will be sharing, for example, the one that I shared previously for automation practice, that one is a very complete script. It does have, it does not use user-defined variables, but it does have many response assertions and the CSV dataset config that you will be able to see and visualize in that sample script.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So let's do for databases. Let me show my, okay. Let me put in my chat here to see any question. Okay, so my database right now, it's based on MySQL. It's a simple database. The goal of this database, of course, is just for testing. It's the demo for practice, performance testing, load testing on database. So my database is focused on MySQL. So you can see I have only one table. It's user details. The description, for example, user ID, username, first name, last name, gender, password, and status. So there are a couple of elements in JMeter to create test plan for database. The first one is the JDBC connection configuration. You have to specify all the information to connect your database. The second one is the JDBC request. So the JDBC request, it's your query, the query for your database. It's the query that you are sending your database. It's so important. Keep in mind that the JDBC driver class. In our case, we are using the driver class for JDBC MySQL because we are using MySQL in the database. But if you are using Oracle, SQL, MongoDB, and Postgre, you have to use the driver class for your databases. So once you identify your database, for example, you have to download the file. In my case, this is the URL for download the connection for MySQL. And then you have to copy that file in the library, into the library folder in JMeter. Let me show you that library here. It's a library in the JMeter. So you have to copy the download file here. This is my case, MySQL connector Java. And then you have to create in your JMeter that element, a JDBC connection configuration and the JDBC request. So let me show you the real example. First of all, let me show you my database. I'm putting my database in my local host. So it's on the name of my database is JMeter. So it includes just one table, user details. So you can see here real values, user ID, username, first name, last name, gender, password, etc. So in my script, the first step is going to the test plan and then right click, uh, include, for example, the configuration element specific for the JDBC connection configuration. Okay, so you have to click here, and then in that element, you have to put in all the info to connect to the database. In my case, I'm using MySQL, so I have to specify first of all the URL. In my case, JDBC, MySQL, my host, it's my local host. I'm putting here the port for my database is 3306, and the name of my database is JMeter. So the next field, it's the driver class. I say before, my driver class is MySQL, so I need to specify my driver class. So for example, you can select the Postgre, Oracle, it depends what database you are using, all of them here. So in my case, MySQL. So here I put in here my password, my user and my password is my local host, so it doesn't matter, just the username. So after that, I have to create the thread group, and then I have to create and the sample specific for the JDBC request. And here I have to specify the query that I'm doing to my databases. In that case, I put in here 3 query. The first one, it selects all the value from user detail, the only table, where the first name is equal to David. The second one, select the username from that table when the first name is David and the gender is male. And the last one, it's where the password is this one. So here I have to specify how many users do you have to simulate. In our case, let me show you first of all, just from one user here, and let me put in here the view result tree and the aggregate graph to see what happened with my result of my database. Let me execute. Let me put in here my query. So here is the view result tree, is the classic one for the web service. Even for the database, you can click here and you can see on the request, your query, on your response, the result of your query. So even for the other ones, like this one and this one here. So here you can see the result for the response time. For example, here you can see the average, the median, the 90%, the 95%. So in that case, for example, the maximum was 30 milliseconds. So if you put in here, for example, I don't know, 100, that number will be increased because you are increase all your query on your database. So if you see right now it's 199. So if you are increasing the number of the user, your response time would be increased too. So it's very, it's pretty easy for the database. The most important thing here is, create the perfect connection to the database, specifying your driver class, the name of your database, all of this value. So that's all about databases. So if I any question.
Guys, just a reminder, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions like by voice. Do not hesitate. We are all here to learn.
Can you please provide an example with we use it for your situation? Do not play with production database. Exactly. Don't do the performance testing on production. It's kind. No, don't do that. Yeah, exactly. With parameter, non-UI, it's very important. When you are creating performance testing on JMeter, you have to use non-UI. I mean, the console, because if you're using the interface of JMeter, that consume a lot of resource for your computer. So it's a best practice use the command line. It's useful when you run exactly. So is there a way to throw the connection by JMeter to simulate different network speeds? I don't know exactly that question because I didn't that before, but I think that we can use another tool or another proxy that simulate different network speeds, even the shardless proxy. I don't know exactly, but you can looking for about the shardless proxy that simulate different, network connection, network speed.
I think, sorry to interrupt, I think that when you measure performance, it's better to place all these tools just behind your database or somewhere as close as possible, because your main concern is not like a connection or something. You just want to measure in a predictable way how your service responds. That's why I usually like to use some virtual machine in the same data center or something like that, as close as possible.
Yeah, even it's the best practice. Don't execute JMeter testing on your laptop, your own laptop. You have to looking for, different virtual machine, like you say before, or even you can go to the cloud, use any platform like, Florio, BlazeMeter. I know you have to pay for that, but if you are doing the huge testing, the huge load testing, like a thousand of user, you have to keep in mind a scale your environment, your machine generate, because it's so important. It's so important. Don't do the performance testing on your laptop. You can use, remote testing and distribute testing, any solution for that.
Yeah, you can debug on laptop, but if you want to get like true numbers,
yeah, exactly.
No way.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all for us. Anton, I don't know if you have any question. We are so glad to share, our script, even the script for the Christopher, the Blaze web service database. We can share the script with you. Even the website, the automation practice is the good website to practice, not just load testing, even for automation testing using Selenium, whatever, and other tools. Even we have a web application ready to, like a demo. Is the name is testingyes.com. You can use that website to simulate. Please don't put in loads on that server. It's not a good server. It's a classic web server, but you can practice scripting on that web application.
By the way, maybe you know some resource on GitHub or somewhere where people can just play from the beginning to some advanced level with Geometer in some sandbox environment, or using some Docker to start some little sandbox, and where you can do some exercises and understand how it works just on your machine. If you have some resource, it would be useful for everyone, I think.
Okay, perfect.
So, guys, if there are no questions, Do we have
one question? Hey guys, do you hear me?
Yep.
And what about CI tool integration with JMeter? Is it possible?
Integration with?
CI, like
CI pipeline?
Jenkins or
Yeah, of
whatever.
course.
Yeah.
You can integrate JMeter with Jenkins. It's very easy to integrate. Yep. It's a good
Okay, thank
option.
you.
Yep.
So you just have to use command line execution. That's it, right?
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
And by the way, we live in the world where everything is inside Docker. What do you think about execution? Do you need to execute just from virtual machine native Geometer binaries, or there are some Docker images with Geometer runner, let's say, that you can use to interact with your GMX scenarios? What is better?
So you know what, Anton? I have the experience working with that tool on the cloud, even BlazeMeter and Florio, because when you try to execute JMeter using that result, it's kind of complicated get that result. So it's better, create the script on the JMeter. You can debugging the script on your laptop, of course, trying 2 user, 3 user, prepare your script, and when your script is ready, go to the cloud. I mean, there are a couple of tools. I know you have to pay for that, but it's not the big number. I remember I I did the last month testing on Florio. So I was executing like a 100 user. So I spent like a $100. It's not a big number. So my recommendation is try to execute that script on the cloud, because it's very to understand the result is more clarifying. So
I understand, but there are some air-gapped environments where you cannot allow to use cloud. If you can choose between execution inside Docker or execution inside virtual machine, what is better from your perspective?
Docker is better. The Docker
Okay.
is better. Yeah. Because
So
the virtual machine consumes a lot of resource. So that can affect your execution from the JMeter. So Docker is more quickly.
okay, thank you very much for your talk, and it was great to have you. You can stay because we have second talk now.
Perfect.
Alexander will explain us what is
Before that,
contract.
Anton,
Sorry?
can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so very nice, engaging talk, Christopher and Delvis. I'm pretty much all on with that. So I'd like to ask a question. So in the demo, we have seen a correlation comparison. What is it? Web application, I believe. So where we have imported both the JMX files and correlated. So I heard there is a plugin also available in JMeter, like auto correlation in JMeter. So if you have some links on it or any work, could you please share? I understand that comparison web application is not open source. So I'd like to ask this plugin, which is there in JMeter, at least those links.
Yeah, JMeter includes the plugin for the correlation, but right now it's no completed. I think I'm not sure right now, but that tool that we present before, we are using in our projects is not on the market. It's not open source. It's no pay. It's nothing. It's just for us for doing in our projects. So we are developer the tool right now. We can share with you the link for even you can test that application and give us the feedback if you want. Christopher?
Correct. I mean, we've mostly used it internally, but we can definitely share the link
Yeah.
for the web app, and that way, hey, we're in the world of testing, and more people testing it, the better. That gives us the feedback that we
Exactly.
need to be able to finally put it out there for everyone to use completely.
Awesome. Makes sense. Thank you very much, Christopher.
Awesome. So again, thank you very much, guys, for this talk.